Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal with Milko's application team, doing our Design Shop Talk today to see what questions you might have. Hang on, Milko's messaging me. I'm sorry. It's good to go. Excellent. All right. So we are doing our Design Shop Day. I'll see what questions you might have. I did get some sent in ahead of time. I'll start with those. If you have questions while we're live, type them in the chats. We're live on both Facebook and YouTube. So type them in the chat. Don't send them privately. I don't see those. So just send them in and we'll see what we can do. All right, so I'm going to start off with the questions that were sent in. Can you review how to split an element? Do you need to convert to wireframe first? Why is split element grayed out when I choose points? Okay, so the split element, it really depends. I asked you, the person who asked this, I asked a follow-up question, didn't see a response to it. So how it works really depends on what type of element you have selected. Okay, so let's take a look. Oh, I don't want any of that. Go away. All right, so let's say we have a fill. Okay, so I have a fill. And I want to split it across, let's say, that point and that point. So from there to there. In order for the split to work, I have to have both of those points selected. Okay, so I can't just click one point and say split because it's a filled object. It's not going to work, right? So even if I hold this down, it's going to be grayed out. So I can use this custom point selection right here, or I can use, what's the other one? So custom point selection, or I can hold my control key. So if I click on that one, hold the control key on the keyboard and click on that one, now 2 points are selected and I can split element at selected points. It'll do a line across it. Okay. You can also split across splice lines. So let's say I have a splice line on here. Good morning, Colleen. Thanks for joining. So there's a few different ways you can split this guy, right? So I've got a splice line. So I can right click and just go operations, break object. All right, and that'll split it apart. So now, and good morning, Mike. Thanks for playing today. All right, so we've got this guy. So that's one way we can break object. What's another way we can do it? So again, if I have a splice line running across here, another way we can use split element is if I select, again, control key, select the ending points of that. Again, there's my split element. I can tell it to split. And my splice was weird. So there we go. I've got multiple splits now. Okay. So it really just depends on how you want to split it apart for a fill. Different ways you can do it. All right, so let's look at how else that tool works. Now, if I have a walking element or a column, I'm going to draw a bunch of them real quick. So here's a single line. Well, that other one was a single line. That's a column. Okay, so these things, the tool works a little different, right? This is just a straight line. So if I click on a point, notice split element is there. So I can split element, and now this is 2 lines. I can again click there and say split element. And now I've got it broken up into elements. With your single line, it works. This is a single line center. It works the same way. You split it just at a center point, wherever line. This guy, it's a column 1. And again, I can click on one side and say split element, and it will split it. Whereas if this were a fill, so I'm going to operations, change element type, complex fill, replace. So now this is a fill. Notice clicking on one point, that tool is gray, even though this was a column and one side worked. In order to split across there, I'd have to select those 2 using my control key and splitting across those points. So you see that the tool works different depending on what type of element you have selected. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of it. It really is columns, your single lines, and your fills. The fills, you have to have multiple points selected to tell it where to split across. Your single lines and your walks, it can be a single point. Depending on the columns, it can be a single point because it's going to go across. I believe the column 2, let's do that one real quick since I skipped that one. I always use column 1. So there's a column 2. if I click on one point, so here, yeah, so this behaves just like a column, like a fill. You have to select both points to tell it where to split across. Okay, so it's your column 2 and your fills. You have to select 2 points, your column 1 and your single lines, and your walk stitches, you can select 1 point. Okay, good morning, Rachel. Thanks for joining. Okay, I did not check if both feeds were up. Oh yeah, they are. Excellent. Okay. All right, so that is how the split tool works. So let me know if that didn't help. What advice do you have to avoid stitching from sometimes missing the fabric edge, especially when doing pre-cut letters? So this is for applique. All right, so my tips and tricks on that one, right? So let me do, I'm just going to do a basic shape. All right, so let's say that is my applique shape. Copy, paste. I'm turning this into an applique. Copy, paste. Hold the control key, turn that over into a satin, make that a tackle. Let's make that 30. And then I'm going to copy, paste, make that a satin with 40. Okay, so I have an applique design. Let me give it different colors so it actually is an applique design. There we go. Okay, so let's say the question was, particularly if you're dealing with pre-cut letters, how do you avoid that lovely little thing that you'll see where, let's say you cut it here and all of a sudden it's fraying either on this side or this side, it's pulling free. All right, so it really depends on how you cut, how close you cut, and what type of materials you're using, if they're heat sealed. There's a lot of different factors. But if you have a pre-cut letter, typically it's going to have some sort of clean finish on the edge, so that you don't have to worry about pokies, I don't know, the uneven trimming around it sticking out from under the top stitching, right? So in those cases, what I would suggest is rather than having your top stitching go straight, you know, half on the fabric, half off the fabric, I would change that so more of it is on the fabric than off, right? So how do you do that? So you're gonna have to do it with these tackle stitch as well as your top stitching. If you go into the properties and go to the single line, right here, you can do left. That's probably not a good idea. You can do right, which is definitely not a good idea, or you can do custom. So left puts it more on the fabric than off the fabric, right? So 70-30, I like that split for pre-cuts. Okay, so 70% of the column width is on top of the fabric, 30% is off. Oops, or you can move it like that. So that is my personal preference when dealing with pre-cuts, right? Oh, we get more people joining. Thank you, Kritza and Kathleen. Thanks. Let us type in the chat if you have questions. All right, so if you're dealing with pre-cuts, that would be my suggestion. Have it more on than off. Now, if on the other hand, you're cutting it and by hand, or it's pulling free, or it's sticking out on this side, you might want to go the other way, right? So it really, you got to look at it for your materials, what is going on and how to adjust it. Pre-cuts, this is my preference. If I'm dealing with, I'm cutting in the hoop, I tend to set this single line to being 60-40, 40% off the fabric, 60% on. I cut really close to the line, so that works well for me. And that allows more stitching on the fabric than off. So again, that works. Those are my personal preferences when dealing with appliques to kind of avoid that phenomenon you're talking about. All right, I'm gonna jump over to a question typed in. Is there a way to make a walk stitch longer after it's already digitized? Is there a way to add points to the line? Are you looking at, okay, so I'll read it directly for those who don't see the question. If I have a walk line already in my design, is there a way to add points to the line so that's already created, like adding points or something? Okay, yes, it really depends on whether you're going to, if you're working with a DST file or a expanded, right? So if you're dealing with like this right here, turning that on shows you the expanded editing mode, right? And this is just the wireframe mode. So this is wireframe. So if I want to change it, all I have to do, oops, let's go back to wire. I would select the point, move it, and it will add more stitches. And you can see it added more needle penetrations along there, right? So yes, you can do that. Another way is, let's say you have a line and in your design somewhere and you want to add an additional line. Well, you can just come over to your walk, click where that one ended, and move over. So that's another way. But the easiest, since you're working with an OFM, is just to drag your wireframe point around or add an additional point and drag that around, right? So you can make this as long or as short as you want just by moving the points around. Rachel, does that help? So you can see I can add curved points, rectangle points. I can take this one and go, I need it a little bit longer, move it over, those sorts of things. Okay, so Rachel, let me know. How about embroidering the pants? All right, how do you embroider pant legs? Is kind of how I'm reading your question, Kathleen. Okay, so pant legs, you've got a few different options. Whatever hoop you can get in there. If you can get it hooped and on your machine, you can embroider it, right? So pant legs are pretty narrow. If you're trying to do a really big design, you're gonna have to cut the seam open. I've done that to do really large designs all the way up, and then I just sew it back. I've got sergers and sewing machines here, so that's what I personally do when I'm wanting to do a very large design up it. If all you're going to do is a single thing, as long as you can get the material hooped, you just put it on your machine and go, right? Magnetic hoops work really well, particularly with working over the heavy seam on the denim, right? So if you're going to try to sew over that seam, which you can, up your Actifeed hoop with a Mighty hoop or some sort of magnetic hoop. That way it's not going to, you're not going to have to fight with it. The plastic hoops sometimes when going over those bulky seams get difficult at best. So that would be my suggestion for it. You know, either just whatever hoop you can get in there, as long as you can get the hoop on. I would recommend loading it if you're doing it high on the hip or on the high part of the leg, hooping it through the waist of the jeans. It's a larger opening, so you don't have to worry about it. So load it onto the machine straight on with the waist. So just hoop it where you want it, pop it on. Denim is pretty durable, so you might be able to get away with using tearaway. I don't use tearaway on anything unless I absolutely have to. So I heavily prefer using a cutaway material, a cutaway backing. Okay. So I'm going to pop back over to Kathleen. Let me know if that helps or if you want more info or more specifically what you're looking for. So I'm going to jump back to the questions that were sent in ahead of time. How do you go? Can you go over how to change settings to get letters to sew from the inside out for hats? Sure. Okay, so we have some text. Center out. Control text. All right. I've got some text here. I'm going to center it on my hoop, which is not really useful for what you're asking, but do it anyway. So I'm going to go into the properties. So when you have your text, double click on it, right click, go to properties, any of those. Down here is the magic, right? So this one is vertical stitch order. That tells it to sew. Oh, let me go back. So notice the green circle is there. The red X is down here. That means it's sewing left to right, top to bottom. When you're doing hats, you want bottom to top, center out, right? So changing this to bottom to top, that moves it. So it's going to sew text first, and then it will sew center out. That part of the text. So it's going to sew the bottom line and then the top line. If I want it to sew center out, I want to do horizontal stitch order. Now you'll see it's going to do X, T, E, T. So if I redraw it, you can see it's starting there and it's ending there. And that's because it's literally drawing this bottom to top and center out. So it's working with you to go away from the brim and away from that center seam. So text is the simplest and easiest to be able to do this with. You just adjust the settings on your text right here and send it to your machine and go. It's good stuff. All right. This one, we had some follow-up messages. I didn't get the file. I don't get PMs through Facebook. So if you send them, I will never see them. So that's not the way to get me files to me. You want to send them over to Melco, the applications team, or to the service desk, whichever is appropriate, and they'll get the files to all of us that need it. All right. But I know that one sent the file in this morning, so we'll take a look at it. I didn't get it before this, so. Is there a way to turn off snap to grid row in the view tab feature indefinitely? I was not able to. It's off indefinitely for me, so I don't know what's going on there. I have the guy I need to talk to is out of town more. He's not in the office until the 26th, so, or until next week. So I don't know how to answer that question because I can't duplicate it staying on. I turned it off and it stayed off. So I am working on that for you. I will hopefully have a better answer next week. Because I can't duplicate it. I'm having trouble setting up text for the arch on the back of a snapback hats. I just can't get it right. What advice do you have for me? So my favorite way to do complex shapes of any sort is to, I'm trying to, I got rid of my papers. Sorry. Let's see my ridiculous outfit. I'm sorry. Okay. Whenever I have any weird shape that I'm trying to embroider around, and it would have been better for me just to grab a hat, huh? Since I have one sitting behind me. My favorite thing to do is to take the hat and this one is not a snapback, so I'd have to move it around. But what I would do is lay it on a flat surface. So I can't do it with this one, but I would lay it on a flat surface and use my phone and take a picture straight down. So on a snapback, I'd open it up, stretch it out nice and flat, take a picture of it. Okay. And straight down with your camera with a scale. So I would put a ruler in the picture, and that way when you get the picture, now you can come over to your computer, bring that picture in and scale it. So what I mean by that is if you pull a picture in, and I'm just going to draw this, and to be silly, let's say I put a 1-inch square in my picture, right? So when I took it, so let's pretend this thing right here is 1 inch in my physical picture. So what I would do is I'd come over here and I'd measure it and go, okay, that's 0.6 inches. And with the actual picture, which you'd select over here as a JPEG, you can then scale it up using these things down here, right? So you could tell it, all right, make that 13 inches. And then I can move it around and go, all right, well, is that now an inch? So I scale everything, the whole picture, until I get the scale right. So in this case, this is a vector, so I could just do it with numbers, but that's how I do weird shaped things, whether it be a collar, the back of a hat, things like that. I literally take a picture, I bring that picture into DesignShop, and then using this ruler or this grid on here, I use that as my guide of whether I got this to be an inch or not. Once it's there, now I have a picture of the actual hat, right? That has the arch on it that I can now digitize around. So that's how I do it. From there, you can print it actual size. So rather than sewing it out and getting mad, you can actually print it actual size, go lay it on your hat, pin it to it, tape it, whatever you want, to see if it works or if you need to make slight adjustment, because sometimes camera angles, whether you take it slightly off and not directly on, can warp the shape. So you can make adjustments that way. So those are kind of my tips on that one. Let's see. Not sure if my software is having a glitch. Trying to select multiple nodes and move. Okay. So when you're moving multiple nodes, right? So if I go to select multiple points, how do you do that? So you select them. You have to get them both selected to be black, all right? So you can do that using this custom point selection, or you can hold the control key down and select them one at a time. From there, I can left click and drag and they move together, right? So if I want to, again, take this, select all these 4 points here, I can use that custom point selection because it's fast, right? And then I can left click and drag those around. If they're not black, so if you keep on selecting them without turning them black, so I select both of those and now I click and move, they're not going to move together because they were never selected together. You have to either hold the control key or select multiple nodes. Okay, so Marcy, does that help any? How would I get a regular image I digitized to go on a cap to sew center out? Is it the same way you showed with text? No. So when you're doing cap designs, you actually have to digitize it and think about it to sew center out. So let me go find a design. Dropbox, Milko, where's Milko? Class file. Oh, Elysian Heat, that one's good. This is a hat design. All right, so if you actually have to plan out the design of how you're going to sew it to force it to sew center out. So for instance, this guy sews this thing first. It's from the bottom. And how does it sew center out? Well, it was digitized so that it builds out, right? So it's got a running stitch so that you're not starting directly on that center seam. So it starts over here so that and does this walking stitch that gets covered up just so the machine can get to speed before it's going into full sewing. And it does the underlay, comes back, does more underlay. So it did this going out, that going out, and now it's running around to stop the edges from moving around. Again, some more protections on the edges, which are great to stop it from shifting when it goes to sew. Make sure you have good coverage. That's what all these are doing, right? So this was planned out and thought about so that now when it sews this very last thing, it goes from bottom to top and sews it. So that forced this whole fill to sew center out, bottom to top, okay? Well, then what happens? Well, now we're going to continue that theme of center out, bottom up by doing this element next, then that one. So it does this side, then that side. Still going bottom to top. So it's going to sew this up. Does the fill on that, so the blending. And now all this detail work, again, it just plans it out so that it's optimizing the orientation of and order of how it sews out. So you can see with hat designs, it really is a matter of focusing. And I'm sorry, my dog is drinking water in the background, if you can hear him. But that is, it's really, you have to plan it out so that it's sewing center out. It's not just a click a button like you can with text, because everything has to be thought about like a puzzle. So John, does that help any? It's really just working through the design to optimize it to sew appropriately for a hat. It's not a bad idea to get in the habit of that. I routinely just make one design, center out, and sew it on left chest because it's going to sew fine on a left chest, center out, bottom up, just like it is on a hat. And that way I don't have to worry about digitizing it twice. So that's just what I've gotten in the habit of doing. I just do one, and you know, that way it's already set up for a hat if I ever want to do that. Okay. What other questions? Any more typed in? Scrolling. Okay. No more typed in, so let's go back to the ones that were sent in. We talked about that. How to make freestanding 3D patches with adhesive backing. So I assume you mean puff backing with or puff patches? Is that what you mean by 3D? I mean, adhesive backing is going to be a little bit of a challenge because when you go to apply the adhesive, you need a heat press, and puff, you really don't want to smash the daylights out of it with a heat press. So if you mean just make patches with adhesive, you would make a normal patch and sew it out. And then apply the pressure sensitive adhesive after the fact. So that's a material that you can buy. It's a PSA. You heat press it on and then you kind of just rip it off or cut it out to the shape, and it makes the entire back sticky. Some of them are actually sticky with a heat press into it as well. So what I mean, a heat applied backing. So not only is sticky, but it allows your customers to place and heat press, and it bonds it temporarily to the fabric as well. Can you get a link to a video on how to make patches? Absolutely. We have a bunch of resources out there, and I know I've covered them quite a bit on these Design Shop Talks. I don't know if someone from Melco is still on helping. If they're not, when we end, I'll go grab it. But let me show you where to find it. So just in case, let's see, Melco-service. So if you go to, oops, let me go back. So if you go to Melco-service, then click on FAQ. Up here, patch. Type in patch. So there's a bunch of different ways to do them, right? We got a support article for you on them, but there's, and I know I've talked about them a lot on Design Shop Talk, so there's more resources there even. But there's different techniques here, how to make patches. There's links to the videos, all sorts of things. So I would start there. And if you still have questions on it, let us know and we can add more things. But we did get a link in the comments for you on patches. But, I mean, freestanding 3D patches. Freestanding meaning no fabric. Sorry, nomenclature gets me sometimes. I would still put a fabric even if you're going to embroider it. It doesn't have to be anything major. But that way you can embroider the entire thing and have a nice firm patch rather than one that kind of is just on stabilizer. That's just, again, my personal preference. So digitizing puff embroidery fonts. Well, there's a few things. We have built-in fonts that are digitized, that are already planned out for puff. So let's look at those first. So new, there, puff. So you'll see there's a few of them there. If I don't actually search like that, you'll see there's a category. So there's two fonts. When you use these fonts, there is a thing that you need to apply to it. So if you're going to use the puff fonts, you select it as puff, and then you have to apply properties to it. So if you go into styles, down here there's a puff alphabets. Select that puff alphabet selection and hit apply. And now all the settings are applied to be puff. Hey, one moment. Out. Can you put in the list? Sorry, my dog barking at us. All right, so that is, one moment, one more thing. He has been a pain. All right. There we go. Okay. So that's all there is to using the puff fonts. Now, if what you're actually looking to do is digitizing puff designs from scratch, there's a lot of resources out there for you. Or if you're trying to take existing fonts and turn them into puff fonts, you got to worry about capping the ends and doing things like that. So in those cases, we have a lot of good resources out there. Check those out, and if those don't help, then let us know what more clarification you want. But in that same service section where the FAQ is, you can look for puff. And there's some things right here. Okay. So, what else do we have? Is there a general rule of thumb for the number of stitches for a left chest logo? I have a logo that fits 5.5 by 5.5, but it has 7,400 stitches in a small area. I don't know of any rule of thumb. I've done small left chests with close to 20,000 stitches. It just depends on the design. So I'm not aware of a rule of thumb. But the more stitches you put, the denser it becomes, the heavier the heavier physically the logo is going to be. So that may cause kind of weird badge effects depending on how thin your garment is. Yeah, you're worried it might pucker on a polo. Yeah, it might. But you can avoid it. I wouldn't be so concerned with puckering as the heaviness, because puckering is really just a matter of having appropriate stabilizers, making sure you're not overstretching it, and that you're hooping appropriately for the material. So with performance wear or really thin materials, you can use like, we have some good articles on dealing with performance wear, but my favorite is to use like a Cut Performance or a Weblon, 2 layers of that. Use a 505 adhesive, so a spray adhesive, where you take the stabilizers, take 1 layer, spray it with adhesive, apply the 2nd layer, spray that with adhesive, apply it to the back of the shirt when it's not stretched or anything like that. Now your shirt and 2 layers of adhesive are glued together. So the key to not having puckering or registration issues, both, is going to be making sure everything holds still. So if I glue it all together with spray adhesive and multiple layers of stabilizer, it can't move. Then hoop it well, right? If it's loose in the hoop, it's going to move, and that's going to cause puckering and other things. So hoop it well. All of that, if it's held nice and still, it's not going to move. It's not going to pucker. But the heavier the design, the more you end up with this really heavy thing hanging off of a thin fabric. So personally, puckering on a polo wouldn't be my concern. My concern would be the heaviness for the weight of the fabric, and whether that's okay with your customers or not. Hi, John. Thanks for joining. All right, so what else do we have? Rachel, hopefully that helped. Let's see. When you pull your design from DesignShop, how do you get the colors to stay so you don't have to change them all? Mine reverts to the colors of the last design that was stitched. Okay, so when you load your design into, so this makes it sound like a DesignShop question, but I'm based on reverts to the last design that was stitched. That to me says this is actually asking about it. OS. So when you're setting up your colors right here, this is whatever that is going to be, whatever the last design that was sewn was set to, right? So your color sequence is going to be whatever was sewn last. So when you load a new design to DesignShop, unless you tell it to auto select colors, it's going to show you whatever the last design was. So you can clear it all, and then you can auto match colors, and this is what the current design down here, it shows you what the current design colors are. So you can tell it to auto match, and then it will automatically apply. Or down here, you can make it automatically define the color sequence, and that's going to then match the colors of the OFM to the colors in your thread tree. So that only works if this thread tree is colored correctly, and your OFM is colored correctly. If not, it's going to pop up, hey, this color's not there. What are you going to use? Hey, this color's not there. What color do you want to use? Those sorts of things. So you get a bunch of pop-ups. Or you can tell it to use next closest match, and if you have an orange up here and you need to use an orange, it'll guess and pick one of them. It might not be the one you intended to pick, but it'll pick one. So this, there's no changing that. This is what was sewn last, and unless you apply a new color sequence, it's always going to show you whatever, show the design until you change the colors to what you want it to sew in. Okay. For here, help, what am I doing wrong? All right, so what I see here is some really thin stuff going on a hat, right? So this is the underlay that's sticking out. So a few things. One, add some pull offset. All right, what is pull offset if you're unaware? So let's use the Juliet font, I think is really narrow. Juliet script? No, it's that one. Narrow. Okay, so this is a really thin font, right? So what can I do to make that sew better if I were going to put it on a hat, right? Well, one, you already have a center walk, which is good. But in the properties of the center walk, you can come over and on the underlay, change the stitch length to lower, to smaller numbers. That'll put the needle penetrations, well, Longer pieces of thread are more likely to stick out than smaller pieces because they'll lay over more than a short stitch. So by decreasing this, that makes more needle penetrations along there. It makes the stitches shorter. It'll follow the curves better, those sorts of things. So that's one. I do not recommend making that number smaller than the size of your needle because you're going to be stabbing your material in the same spot multiple times, okay? But you can decrease this as long as it's larger than the diameter of your needle. All right, and that'll make it track closer to the shape, give you a better underlay so that it's not the stitch length causing it. The next thing is on pull compensation. Make sure you've got some offset on this. That makes these columns bolder, wider. So notice when that was 0, see how that's narrow? Each point it's getting bolder, all right? I'm being ridiculous. Do you need 10? Absolutely not. What is a good number for pull offset? 1 to 2 is my preference. I usually put 2 on tiny things. But 1 to 2 is good. So that'll make it bolder. So, where did my other paper go? I had some notes written down to remind myself so I didn't forget anything. Yeah, so those would be the number one things. Make sure you increase the width of your columns, fix your underlay, and then hoop it well. Hats, if you look at this, remember hats when you're hooping them, if you're using the 270 cap frame, right? So that's the real thin band that goes all the way around. It's the only way it's secured to your hat hoop is along that band. There's a paper stabilizer behind there, but if you don't use the clips that come with the hoop and clip the paper and the hat to those black posts on the hoop itself, you're not actually securing the top of the hat, so it can move. If it can move, you can have things like this happen, right? So by using your stabilizer, using not the pre-cuts, but a nice long one that wraps all the way around to those black posts, and using the clips to nice and tight secure the hat tightly along down to those black posts on your hat hoop, add some pull offset, fix your underlay, and that should help out significantly. Okay? Any other quick? Hopefully that helps for this. All right, this one, Sophia asks, I don't have Wilcom and I don't understand any of this. So if you have I phoned a friend, and both of us had the same thing. We would need to see a file to be able to study the needle penetrations to see what it's actually doing, to be able to tell you how to recreate that in DesignShop, because this nomenclature and what it's doing, I don't understand to be able to help you. So in order to tell you how to do it in DesignShop, I need to understand what it's doing, what this physically is doing with the needle penetrations. So I don't even know where to start with this one. I need to reduce a DST file from 3 inches to 1.75. Is that possible? Is it possible? Yes. Should you do it? Probably not. I mean, you can scale something down by size, but a DST file, I just wouldn't do that. I mean, here, I'll give you an example why. So let's say this thing is in my DST file. Let's make it smaller. All right, so let's say my DST file had a 0.75 inch, let's make it a 0.6 inch tall text in it, right? And if I measure that, this column is 13 points. It's really narrow. If I shrink that by 40%, all right, so let's take this entire thing. I'm going to save this off, so I'm going to save it as a DST, so it will actually do it for you. So file, save as DST. All right, so I'm going to go open my DST file. Documents. Oh, I didn't save it as an actual DST. DST, there we go. DST. That's silly, but okay. Open. DST. There we go. All right, So I saved this as a DST file. So this column is nice and narrow. If I take this thing now and shrink it by, so go from 3 inches to 1.75. Okay, these columns, while it did scale it, this column is now 7 points, right? It's not guaranteed to sew well because these columns get so small. The needle penetrations get so close together. So when you're making drastic changes, right, to something, it's always going to be better to digitize it specific for the size. In general, just scaling something down by changing the size down here, while you can do it, it would be better to actually digitize it for what you're trying to do. Because, I mean, look at some of these. While it looks nice on the screen, you know, it looks like it did it. That's 6 points. My needle size it's not going to sew well. I can just tell you that. It's just too small because you want to keep columns bigger than 10 to 12 at a bare minimum, right? So how did I do that? Well, undo. So physically scaling it, you can come down here, type in whatever size you want. It will scale your DST file down. Recalculate stuff and it will go. Yeah. So, yeah, hopefully that helps. But literally, if I'm doing anything more than 10 to 20% scaling, I'll actually go redigitize it myself. Or I will ask whoever digitized it to scale it for me, because when it's in wireframe format, you can do what you want. You can scale it and it'll recalculate the stitches for you. All right, so someone asks, when I go to Design Checker, it seemed to get something that says 127 points under. 127 points. I'm guessing it's telling you have stitch lengths larger than 127 points. I don't know. I'd need to see the actual error to be able to help with what that is. I don't remember them all off the top of my head. Is there a way to create a stamp to a fill area? So, all right. You have, so if it says you have stitches larger than 127 points, 127 points is a really long piece of thread, which is not really a good idea to have. So if you have that, you can click on the error. It will put a little crosshair on there showing you where that is happening, so that you can either update the settings of that to have more needle penetrations, or you can decide whether that's something you want. The cases I could think of that long pieces of thread like that are okay, or could be considered okay, would be on designs that are like puff designs. It's very normal to have very long pieces of thread. They're going on a hat. They're not prone to snagging. But if I were trying to put that on a left chest, you don't want 1-inch pieces of thread, because that's really easy to get snagged with a pin. And next thing you know, the embroidery's ruined. So it kind of depends on what application it is, whether you even need to fix it. But it's a warning for you that you've got something really long that you need to either decide cognitively, yes, that's okay, I know it's long, I'm good with that, or yikes, that's long, I didn't mean that, let me go fix some settings. Okay, so basically, how do you get rid of it? You go update the element that has that long stitch to either change its density or address it that way. Is there a way to create a stamp to a fill area? Yes, and I haven't done it in so long. I'm going to end up fumbling here, reminding myself how to do it. Let's see, $. I think if I copy that, copy clipboard shape, yeah, okay, that was one. Right here, goodness, I haven't done it in so long, I'm sorry, it's going to whole paste. Nope, that wasn't it. All right, I'm gonna have to remind myself and do that for you next week, because it literally, last time I did that was a few years ago. Marcy, so I'm sorry. There absolutely is a way to do it, because I've done it before, and it involves this guy right here. That copy the shape into the clipboard, and then you can paste it onto it, but I don't remember how to make it pop as a stamp rather than just what I'm doing here, which is pasting it on top of it. So you got me. It's been a while since I've actually been flustered online, so that's funny. But oh my gosh, it's gonna annoy me now. Oh, maybe that's why, because I have no stitch direction. All right, sorry, I'm gonna play with it one more minute to see if I magically find it or if. All right, so let's see. Haha! All right. I knew it was there. Okay. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. That was extremely childish of me. But there you go. Okay. So what did I... Let me go do it again. Okay. I drew a $sign. Hey, I figured it out in a minute. So, and like I said, I've done it before. All right, I got to fill. What did I actually do here? So I did a $sign just because, why not? So I got my $sign. I came over here and I copied it to the clipboard. Okay, so that way I can paste it on. All right, so I copied that thing to clipboard. I need to now select my shape. And then if you hold this guy down, there's my insert fill island. So if I click on fill island and then do this guy, so both of those are selected, and now I do that, it's going to stamp the shape on there. Okay, so if you have hearts or things like that, you can stamp shapes on it. Okay. Huh. That's fun. It's been a while since I've done that one. All right, Gina and Marcy, there you go. That's how it's done. Copy it into your clipboard and stamp it down. All right, what other questions? Did I miss any? So we talked about the custom splice. Cool. All right, did I have other questions typed in? I think I did. Oh, all right, this one, I do not, wait, okay, what were the commands on that again? It's not really commands per se, it's you gotta click some buttons. All right, so if I've got a fill, all right, so I've got my fill. I have to select the fill. Then if I hold this button down, there is my insert fill island. And then right here is basically using the shape that's in my clipboard. And then I can stamp it down. Okay, so that's what you have to do is draw whatever shape you want first. So let's say I want a heart. Or I'm not doing a heart. I'm gonna do this ugly thing, whatever that is. Okay, so I've got this guy. I'm going to Control C, put that in my clipboard. Now here, click on that, paste it on here, and there, now there's my custom stamp. So you've got to just paste a shape, whatever that shape is, copy it into your clipboard, and then when you go to put the hole in, there's the hole. So I click on that, and then clipboard shape, and when I left click and drag, it will use whatever shape is in the clipboard. Okay. All right, so whether it's that shape, let me change it again to, this is an ugly arrow. I don't know what that is. Anyway, so again, select it, Control C, click on my fill, click on the fill island, then the clipboard shape, left click and drag, poof, I stamped it. It's been a minute since I've done that. Thanks, you reminded me. All right. Okay, what was the one that I was just moving on to? Does this technique lead us to a repeating fill? You save it as a custom fill, and then you can, or as a decorative fill, and then you can change it in there. So yes, you can individually stamp, or you can create it as a decorative fill, and then it will put it in there. So yes, it's a similar technique. You just save it as the thing. Do I think it will work with multiple shapes? I don't know. I did multiple, but at one at a time. I don't think, I wouldn't imagine it would work, but you know, here, let's see. I have a fill. Let's see. There's another. Okay, so I got multiple shapes. Control C to put it in the clipboard. Take this guy, paste, clipboard. Ha! Hey, look, it did it. All right, I'm always entertained when I try things for the first time with you guys, and it does what I think it should. Yeah, it does it with multiple shapes. See? That was cool. Anyway. All right. V9 and V10. I do not have V9 and V10 on any computer anymore. The computer that it was on crashed about 4 years ago. So I don't actually have those to be able to open them up. And I didn't bother trying to install them on my new computers because I don't use them. So I'm going to be going off of memory on this one. I want to embroider names to mimic hand embroider. I was thinking about using the beam block. Beam block in one of those was finicky, so I don't remember which version it was, V10 or V9. I don't remember. So yes, you could use beam block. The beam block works very similar to what we have now. When you go to type it, beam, you just type it out. Its kerning is weird in the older versions, if memory serves, so you have to mess with the kerning, which means the spacing between the letters. Sometimes the letters end up on top of each other, so you have to move them around. But setting wise, I believe you can just go to, I don't know that you can get to the walk settings on that, like you can now. I don't remember. Like I said, it's been a really long time since I've used those. But if you can get to the bean settings, you can use here. But otherwise, the bean font in the older versions was set up just to sew. So all you would do is type it out, sew it. It would sew as I believe, a bean of 3. So if you want it to sew thicker, you would have to copy and paste the font on top of itself and go from there. If you want to do a chain stitch, that there is, you can, but that would be done using decoratives, right? So you would come over and do a decorative chain stitch, and that's the chain stitch in the older versions, right? So if I do an ugly A, right? So on here, that's the chain stitch in the older version. So you go into the properties, and here where it has a chain, you can make it, you know, I would probably leave this one at 100 and maybe reduce that one to 75. You know, you can change it to look more what you want and do some test sew outs on it. So maybe like that. That would give you a nice hand look. Okay, so yeah, the chain stitch would be nice. That would actually look more hand done, in my opinion, than the bean stitch. So that would be my suggestion, would be to draw it out using a walk decorative chain, trace out the text you want, and, you know, digitize it manually. Particularly in the older versions there. In the new version, here, let me show you some fun stuff, just because. Chain. They have these chain fonts in here, which are beautiful. I love them. And they sew like a hand stitch. They're really pretty. Anyway, so these are built into V11. All right. Those are all the questions that were typed in, and I got all those. Let me scan through what was typed in the chats to make sure I didn't miss any. I talked about that. We did that. Okay, awesome. Any other questions before we break for the day? And this was a long one today. Good job, guys, asking lots of questions. Any other questions before I call it a day? None? All right, y'all. I'm heading back to States this weekend. We have sweep. Everyone knows we row. So this weekend it's sweep States, meaning sweep rowing. And Our kids are rowing a bunch of fours, some pairs. Yeah, it's going to be great. All right, y'all. Have a fantastic weekend. I will talk to you next. Let me look at the calendar. I think next week I still have to do Thursday. Yeah, next week I still have to do Thursday. And then the week after that I have to do Thursday because regionals for rowing. So this time of year is crazy. Aw, Keith, great. I'm glad I'm able to help. So you guys have a great weekend. I will talk to you later. Until then, have fun sewing. Bye, everyone.